Hello, I'm George Gonzalez. I'm obsessed with making games, and today's Multiplayer Monday. So, we're going to talk about what I promised last week, and that is voice chat, muting. Next week, we'll talk about the displaying when someone is actually talking in a multiplayer game. But today, we're going to talk about voice chat and how to mute someone. We already talked about the connection, so this is a perfect segue. If you did not look at that, I'll leave a link on the video or in the comments. But this is for actually connecting the UI with voice chat. So here's first we'll talk about the principles, and then we'll get into the code, and then I'll show you how it works or that it's working. It's kind of hard to show the full proof because you have to be in there, and it's in VR, so I need 2 players. But I've done it before, and I know it works. So let me show you. So we have first we need the end result is the local controls, right? You want to pull up a menu or some kind of way of changing settings, and those are local. So you need to be able to see the player that's in the game, and then whether they're muted or not, and then to be able to change that with a button. And okay, so how do we do that? Well, we have the network variables over here, right? The network references for the speakers, and I'm gonna show you that. And so what we need to do is every time someone logs in, we need to grab that reference. And so what we do is I set up a script that will have references to the speaker. So every time someone joins, you'll have access to that. And the way we do that, we have a scriptable object that holds that data. Now, you can also do it with a manager locally. It doesn't have to be a scriptable object. And I'll show you how I used to do it when I just needed the names of the players. When I just needed the player's name, it was super fast because I just grabbed that from a manager. Okay, but I'll show you that. So let's look into this. But this is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to have a script for the network stuff, a scriptable object, and 2 scripts for the local controls. One that spawns the UI prefabs or activates them and fills them up, and then the other one that actually uses the display to mute and unmute. Okay, so let's dive into it. So this is the UI that I have. And when you first pull up the UI, it will automatically list all the players. Because that's sometimes the first information players want. The second one is settings, probably. But the players are usually the thing you want to see, who's available. And so I display that first. And I used to have, I'm going to activate these. I used to have just the display name at the beginning. Okay. And I have the display presenter. Okay. And all these are for this specific. And then we have the player UI presenter. So this is what's spawning all these or activating each one of these. And for now, we're going to say there's a max of 6 players per room. I can change that at any time. You can set up the UIs how you want. Oftentimes, players will do where you spawn the prefab in a UI with a group layout, and you have the prefab set, and it'll automatically resize. But for the sake of my game, I don't want to deal with figuring out the UI and making sure it's spawning correctly, even though it's not a big deal. I just need to save time. I'm a solo dev, so I'm just going to lay it out. I have the prefab and I just duplicated it. So I can still change it later on. We can display an avatar if we want. We can change things how we want. But for now, this will do. We're just grabbing the display name and the mute options. So let me show you how we're doing this. How do you start, right? And so first, what I did is, okay, I have a UI. I need to display these things. How do you change the options, right? So we have on enable, on disable. Then we have an add player, remove player, and this is just a function to get the next available script. So I'm going to close up so if you can see. So all these were new. So when I first started the game, I needed something specific. And this is what I had. I had an area manager, which I still use. I use this area manager to keep track of all the players' multiplayer version in each scene and in each client, because I use it for the monsters. So the monsters will take, for example, I want to know, the monsters need to know who's closest. And so I use this area manager so that the AI are aware of the players in the scene. Because I had that, I was able to do this before. So I want to show you what I used to do, because this is easier if you want to go this route. Is I have this players list, I get all the rigs, and I just grab the players, and for each player, I will open up the display, and then all I did was I had the text, I just went, because I knew how far down it was, and then I would just set the display name, because this Fusion rig has the display name. This is all I needed for the display name. The reason why I'm not using this now is because it can get crazier, right? I can start then adding the transform. There's other things that I would have to add in here to make this work. And you'll see in a second why. But for the sake of storing data, figuring out what it removes, when I remove players, it's a little bit different. What do we do differently? Well, we have a scriptable object. What does this do? This is the key component that I want to show you because it has the list of the players. This player data is just display information. So we have a scriptable object that has a player list. And this player list has this display controller. This display controller has the information, the data. You could call it something else. You could probably call it player display data instead. Maybe I could do better with my naming. The main thing is that it works and you can change it however you want. All we're doing is filling up the data. So we add the player and we remove it. And then we also have a notify when the player is added or removed that we can subscribe to that. And that's what this is, right? This is an event. And so when this is added, it will give me a player display controller. When it's removed, it does the same. And then we have a list. And then we add, remove, and then we also clear the list. So this is specifically when we're changing scenes, because when you change to another scene, you might have a complete different group of people, or the other people are staying behind, and so you will add them again later, okay? Or you might go to a different, or you might leave altogether. So it doesn't, but this is specifically for changing scenes within the same game. Because this is a scriptable object, it will remain active. So whatever you added to this list will stay, even if you move scenes. So we don't want any null references to things that don't exist anymore. So that's why we clear the list the moment we move to another scene. So I'll show you that first. So in here, there's this gate activation. So when we move to another scene, if we have a player list, we clear it. That's all I'm doing. So we set up the scriptable object. This holds the player data. It's set. It's done. This is how you do it. I'll show you here. We have the player list. And this player list, because it's a scriptable object, I can reference it directly. I don't have to do a game object.find. It's just right here. It has no one, nothing. It'll get filled up. This is like the glue. It connects both sides. So you have one side and then the other. Okay, right here. One side and then the other. Okay, so the same way we have, there we go. Okay, so we have it going from network reference to list of players, okay? And then the list of players goes to here. So this reference then, no, stop. This list is being added as players come in, and then the displays are set. So we're gonna go over that. So we have, let's go into the VR Fusion rig. Okay, so this is the network rig. And we could add this specifically to the Fusion rig in here. So we could add it in here and just send the information. But in order to just decouple it a little bit, like I said, we have this display controller. And this is like what holds the data. So this, I could have changed the name. Will probably before I submit the game, I'll change it to player data because that's more accurate. So this is the display data. So if there's anything I want to display, like an avatar, an image, I would probably do it here. It's a network object, okay? Because it's under the Fusion rig, it'll work just fine. And anytime it's spawned, because we want all players to have access to this, because this is just information. And so if we want to get the meta ID, we don't really need that. So I'm just going to delete it because it doesn't matter. But if we want the display name, and then we have mute player and unmute player. And this does something different depending if you have access to if you have a state authority. And this is key. This is very important. So I want you to pay attention if this is something that you want to do or you're interested in, because you might not be using Photon Fusion, right? This is Photon Fusion voice chat. Photon voice chat. You might not be using this, but the principle still applies, okay? Because voice chat in general, you'll have issues with the same thing. There is every voice client or voice network voice will have the sender, right? Like the one that's grabbing the mic input and sending it across network. And then you have the receiver, or in this case, the speaker, the one that's like doing the sound, okay? And when when it's your sound, you're not going to hear it because you're already there. But when you are speaking to other people, this is the speaker that they see, okay? So you have to remember, because in multiplayer games, you're going to have that same, it's how to explain it, that when you have a multiplayer object, you have the same component is in both the player and the owner and the other players, but yours has more capabilities, you could say, or has restrictions on the others. So the other players can't just like change the numbers on your stuff. So they have to access certain information. And so it's kind of like a read only. You can't write to it. So you have to think about that. How am I going to mute the other players? And I can't do an RPC, because if you do an RPC that then like mutes that player, you're muting it for everybody. The mute is for me to stop listening to you, but that doesn't affect anybody else. Okay, so I'm muting you on my side, and that's it. Okay, so in order to do that, what we do in here, we access the speaker and we change the volume, because you can't just shut this off like that, because this is a network object and you don't have state authority over this. So you can't change that, the volume. So in here, you see I changed the volume to 1, and here I changed the volume to 0. And that will mute the player. And I grab the Photon speaker, the audio source, and the volume, and just change the volume on the audio source. Okay, so in here, audio source, and in here, the volume goes down to 0, 1. Okay, the other thing, so now with you, okay, so when I mute myself, that means I'm going to mute myself for everybody. I don't want anyone to hear what I'm saying. And this is a common one, because when you mute yourself, you're not just like muting yourself for your own. It's kind of dumb. So when you mute yourself, you're actually going to go to the recorder that's actually listening to you speak and shut that off. And then it's going to cut all the voice chat from everybody else, okay? Because it's not going to send any data. So there's no way that even if they unmute you, it doesn't matter, because you're not sending any information. How do I have the recorder? Like, how do you get that? And that is the one thing that we talked about, if you remember, when we did the start of the game. Let me see how many references. We have a bunch. But when we made the connection to the voice chat, so in here, this is the one end. And then if you go to voice, Photon voice, or when you connect to the runner, let me see, yeah, this card. So in here, we have different settings, and I want to use the same function. So that's something that wasn't working before. Okay, so what we're gonna do is in here, this voice client is the one that's recording. See, and in here you can check things out with the recorder, and you can do debugs with debug echo. This will give you back the information so you can hear yourself, and you'll know that it's at least recording. Oftentimes with voice chat in general, if it's not working, the first thing I do is this: are you able to hear yourself, your echo? If you can hear your echo, then it means your side is working. Then you need to move on to the next side and check that the data is going through, because it will display a little wave of you talking. Reliable mode is to make sure that the data sent is there, that it's happening. Okay. This is like when it's paused, like if your application pauses, that it stops recording. That way, if you take off your headset in VR, this is very good. Okay, so there's also other ones if you want to use Photon, but Unity, sometimes there's other problems with that. So you can, but usually Unity is more reliable. You can also do voice chat detection with Photon Fusion. So the way that this works is that if you can change this filter so that there's a threshold as to when it sends data. So if it doesn't detect audio 0.03 or 4, that's really good. So that way it doesn't catch the static as sending. So it's good for when you're breathing or maybe eating, so it doesn't catch every little thing when you're playing the game, if for some reason you're eating. And the main thing is in here, let me check where in the game manager, when we connect in the connection manager, see here, this is where we get this reference. And this is why I do it here, is because in my game, I'm moving from scene to scene. So in most games, usually you just have a lobby, you queue up, and then you just play a game for a little bit. When you do that, even then, you want to make sure you grab the correct recorder, because every time you spawn a runner or you connect to a session, you will have a runner that has that voice chat. So we do runner transform get child, and the child has a component recorder. So we just grab that recorder, say, hey, give me the recorder. That's all I need, because we're going to use it later, right? And that recorder is the one that we're seeing in here, right? So what we're doing is when we mute ourselves, we just grab that recorder and disable it, and it's done. You're not recording anymore. We have we spawn, we add this player to the list. The other thing that we might want to have, for example, in here, we can have iPlayer, or on despawn, right? So public override void despawn, right? So if we despawn, we want to do in here, and I tried to do it before, it's not a huge deal, but I want to remove player, this. Okay, so what we're going to do is remove this player from the list. So that way, if I leave the game, I want to disable for everybody else, because I'm not here anymore. So they can't mute me, and so that I don't get a null reference. So we have, now what we're going to do is do the local side, right? So we understand the list. The network object that we have is adding, removing. It has the mute features. Okay, so we have everything connected to the player list. Now we have to attach it to the UI. Okay, so we have UI, the rig. And we have this menu, like I showed you before. We have these tabs. Okay, so How this is where it gets a little bit. It's not messy. You can do it how you want. Um, I'm just trying to do it as simple as I could for this tutorial, okay? So that you understand the concept. You can always polish it and improve on it. Remember, we had that list, okay? So if we're coming in like we're the fifth player, we will add every player that's in the list already, and then we subscribe to these events in case more players come in, okay, or leave. So we have the script, and let's see what add player. So in add player, first we check to make sure that this data is not null, right? So is the for some reason if the player, like again, remember, like if the player list is persistent, or if we have a somebody that left for some reason, or even if they left last minute, right? Like if that data is null, then we're gonna return. Okay. The other thing is in here is the player data. So if we get the value in the entries and it's already in there, like we already have that information, we're going to return. So this is only if it, for some reason we already went through this data so that we don't go through it twice, but that's not a huge deal. But the main thing is we're going to get out this prior entry. But this is not a huge deal. Okay, you can comment it out, I'll be just fine. Okay, so then what we're going to do is get the next available entry. So the way we set this up is we're going to go through that list. You can spawn again the prefabs. I'm not spawning them. I'm checking if I'm using them. Okay, so what I do is I say, okay, give me the list and say which one is not active. And whenever if I find one that's not active, then I want that one and I'm going to activate it. Okay, that's how I can tell if it's ready or not. And then if it's null, if it doesn't give me anything, there's no available entry for some reason. If like my UI is less than the amount of max players, so let's say I change the max players to 10. But I forgot to add 10 entries in here. That's why spawning might be a better idea because then you don't have to worry about changing these numbers. But if I change the number of players to 10, the max players per scene, then I have to go in and change that list to make sure there's 10 entries in there. If not, it's okay because in here it's just going to return. It's not going to add that player. So we're okay. So we're going to add 2 entries. So we have a dictionary in here that's based on display controllers. And the reason why I do this is because remember when we remove the list, we're going to remove, when we remove the player, we're going to use this player display controller to figure out who's who. Okay. So, and then the game object. That game object is the data, the entry that we just got, right? The get next available entry. So we have this entry. So we know which one we can turn off and on when we remove. So I'm going to show you that first. When we remove a player, we say, okay, we're going to try to get it. If there's no entry, we return. Okay. Because this is the opposite. If we don't have an entry, we can't do anything. And that's why the variable is an entry. Now we can say, okay, the entry value that we got out of that is there. It's not false, it's true. And so we're gonna deactivate it or turn it off. Okay, and then we're gonna remove it from the list. Okay, so it's removed from the list, is deactivated. So when we do the get next available entry, that one will be deactivated. Okay, hope that makes sense. So we have the remove. Okay, we have on disable. We remove all the entries, right? Sorry, we want to make sure we remove the subscription to the event. So we don't want to subscribe to the event anymore because we're going to subscribe again later, okay, when we move to the next scene. So and on disable, this UI presenter will remove itself. Okay, so now let's keep going with the add player. I know I cut it short, but I wanted to make sure that you understand it's hard to sometimes grasp what function to do next because you're going to go back and forth between adding things. So some of these come as you build. You're not going to build in order unless you already know, right? So a lot of times you're going to go back and forth trying to figure out, oh, what do I need here? What do I need there? And as you gain experience doing this, you will kind of understand what you need. And that's why I know I'm rambling on, but I want to get this point across. It's like, that's why if you're better, you could be better than me. So, UML charts. This is just visual representation. It's not really UML, but if you want to like create a flow chart of information and how it goes, this will help you because it will get you understanding like how things work together and what you need to work. Okay, so I have this reference here, I have this here, and you understand where the information and the data is. After this, I should really take time to write a document on how this is set up so that if anyone comes in, they understand where the information is. Okay, so after we add it to the entry, right, we understand why we need to add a dictionary. The only reason we have this dictionary is so that we know what to remove. If you spawn objects, you need to know how to destroy them as you go, right? So you need to figure out, okay, I spawned something, you're still gonna need an entry, a list of entries or something. And you don't know which one's gonna get destroyed because you might have one that gets destroyed midway. And so that's something to take into account. Okay, so we're gonna activate it, we're gonna set it to true, and then we're gonna get the component, this display presenter that we haven't talked about yet. But this one needs a setup function. Okay, that is all. Its purpose is mainly for this, and then also to this creates the UI control stuff. Okay, so we're gonna set up the UI. Okay, so this display, and we're gonna do it with that display controller. Remember that controller has the information that we need. Okay, so this is connecting the dots. Okay, so now this is where the stuff that you want is, right? This is the stuff that people think about. Oh, I need to mute. I need to hit mute. When I hit mute, I need to mute the player. When I hit this, I mute and stuff. This is where all the little things are gonna work together. And this is why I called it controller, because we're gonna control stuff. Okay, so we're gonna set it up first. Okay, so we need information. What do we need? Well, I need to make sure that this UI has the display controller that matches. Okay, so we're doing a matching. Okay, this player just came in, match this information with that player. Okay, so we have the display name. We check, is the player muted? Because maybe you're coming in and they already have certain settings. So for example, let's say I come in as the first player, I mute myself because I don't want anyone to hear me. So then the other player comes in, they need to know, is their voice chat on? If it's not, then I want to set the correct button on. Okay, so mute button. If it's muted, I don't need to mute. So I need is muted is backwards. Okay, there you go. So if it's not muted, I should be able to mute because the mute button will set it to true. So this is false. If this is false, then this should be on. If it is muted, then we can unmute. And so that will be on. Okay, so that's all we need for now. We will use this to later set up the throbbing when the player is speaking. But for now, we just need a mute. Okay, we had the text before. This is the same functionality. And now we have the two functions. Okay, we have the mute player and the unmute player. You can do this somewhere else if you want on the UI. You can add listeners. You can spawn the buttons on their own. I like to drag and drop so that I know that things are working. So I don't have to test them, because the less I have to test in the game, at least for VR, the better for me. So I prefer doing the hard work at the beginning by dragging and dropping references rather than spawning and adding listeners as I go. The choice is yours. I like it this way. Okay, so we have a mute button and a mute button. Okay, so when we mute the player, that means we don't need to mute, but we should be able to unmute. Okay, it's the same here, reverse. And then the main thing is this display controller. A lot of you are gonna think, okay, I just want to direct access to the player and I just want to mute them. That's it. Like, I don't. But when you have you need the UI. You need to understand, like, you need to connect the dots, right? And you need a way to reference it. This is, for me, the simplest way to get there. Yes, you might find a different way. I just like this because it's organized, and is the way that you kind of have to do it. If you want a list of all the players and you want to be able to connect them together, this display controller will mute that specific player because it comes from that network function. So that, remember, we talked about the display controller is a network function, and mute player is this network function. Okay, and everyone will have access to that because of the scriptable object. It's just that you don't have read or write access, right? So instead of the audio source is not a network object, so you can change the volume, but you can't deactivate like this. You can't enable or disable stuff because it's not, you don't have state authority, and so the network object will not let you. There's other ways you could do it, but this works. Okay, so let me see. So we have this player list controller that adds the player to this. I'll go through everything so you have access to it. We have the presenter. So this is like the spawner. We have a list. We have all the displays, and we have the dictionary. Okay, that can be public or not. It doesn't matter. On enable, we grab the list. We add players. We subscribe. On disable, we remove the subscription to avoid errors. Add player as the list. We get the next available based on what's active or not. We add the entry so that we can remove it later based on the player data that we get. We set the entry to true. We load it up. We remove, if we want to remove the player, again, we use that list. We remove it. Simple, done. The main thing is this is now that we've done all that setup, now we can actually mute and unmute the player. Okay, so let me show you where that script is. So in here we have the presenter, right? We have the list and we have all the displays. Remember, we have six players. So we have 1, 2, 3, and in here we have a display presenter. I have this as a prefab so that we can check things. So this mute button has the icon, and what this does is there's this overlay that I have for UI. and then mute player. Okay. And then in here we have this other one that has the mute unmute. Okay. And the reason I have this is because it's muted, so now I can unmute by pressing it. It'll display. So the button will display the current state. Okay. Okay, so we have those two UI buttons, and because they are in VR, I have this trigger that will detect the button input, and it's in the UI layer. Okay, how you set those up is up to you. Again, I'm just making sure I'm talking about the accessibility of stuff. Okay, so I'm going to turn all these off. The player tab is on by default. The menu pop-up is a 0.01 and off. Okay, so we have those things. I'm going to show you now. Let's do full. Yes. Play maximized. Let's do that. And if you have any questions, let me know. We can talk about those things. On Thursday, we will go over some leveling up stuff. I know some people ask questions about game development that I'll answer then. And let's see how this works. I'm going to show you. This is just a simple mute. The next week, we will go over the throbbing. Okay, so let's say the loading. I'm in the scene. Okay, I'm going to hit the menu. And you see that's me, my player. And as you can tell, there's the mute. And I can click it. And it'll mute me. And you won't be able to see it. This maximize, but working. So there's the shop, spells, player, and then the toggle. Right? See, so I'm muted. And then we have, so we have some errors. Let's look general. Let's see. Let's just close stuff. Okay, so in here we had a problem. See, so it says an item with the same key has already been added. So in here, for some reason, this was added twice. Oh, because in here for each player add, and then didn't add me. Okay, so in here, so this is good right here. So that will remove that. So lesson learned. So the reason this is here is because sometimes you'll add yourself. So the reason is in here we'll add the players and you might be on that list, but then this will add you. So you're adding yourself twice, okay? But you don't need to. Okay, so now if we do it again, we should not have that error. That's why I comment out things. Okay, I know that most of the time the network stuff is not fun or easy, right? It seems like you end up doing a lot of work for very little. Okay, so let's see. Now if I go back and forth, let's see, because it's on enable, right? On enable, it tries to add everybody again. And if it's there already, it doesn't matter. So now layout default, because I forgot. Okay, so there's no more, oh my God. There's no more errors, okay? And this is for LCK. We'll have to fix that. Okay, and that is it. If you want something specific about network object or a principle, right? Because I'm trying to focus on principle, or if there's a specific thing about networking that you like to see, let me know in the comments. Really appreciate the likes and the subscription. If you want to subscribe to learn more, every Monday, this multiplayer Monday. Every Thursday is a level up day, so we can level up as developers. And every Saturday is a live stream, so that you can see me working live. So I'm trying to be as transparent as possible to help every developer. The whole point of this channel is that there's no excuse to fail, because I'm here to help you finish your games and actually improve and either get a job or build your own studio and be successful as a game developer. We'll see you on Thursday.